Hi guys, back again with me. By the way, how are all the loyal viewers who also often play PlayStation? Because this time we're going to talk about a movie adapted from a PlayStation game called Until Dawn, coming in 2025. For gamers, you must already know how exciting and intense the game is. Curious about what the story is like? Alright then, since this movie will be long with theories and thrilling action, let's just get straight to the discussion. And if you truly enjoy the content on this channel, as is usual, please feel free to hit the subscribe button right now so you definitely don't miss out on any of our other upcoming interesting videos. Our film today begins by showing us a young girl named Melanie who is desperately trying to find a way to get out from deep underground in a dark and mysterious bunker. Talk about having some incredibly bad luck, Mike. Having only just barely escaped from the clutches of a horrifying and monstrous creature, now Melanie is forced to face a cold-blooded and dangerous psychopath. It truly is such a tragic and absolute waste of a life. Melanie's struggle ends up being in vain after she's killed by the psychopath. So what really happened to Melanie? Be patient, because the movie is just getting started. Long story short, the scene shifts to a group of teenagers on a trip. Apparently, they're planning to look for Clover's older sister after losing contact with her for a year. And even though the chances are slim, they still hope to find her and make Clover happy like she used to be. Swatch? I can't stay in that house anymore. Jin, please call me back. Soon after, it turns out that Clover's older sister is Melanie, the gorgeous girl who was killed by the psychopath at the beginning of the film. Seeing Clover lost in thought, a sweet girl named Megan immediately invited her friends to pray, hoping that Melanie could be found soon.
Okay. All right, that is good. And now, I want you to try to carefully adjust everything around you. Sometimes, in those quiet moments, you finally find a clear signal, and then you slowly lower your breath. Well, you just wait and see what happens next.
That's just the GoPro. They were suddenly shocked when they were almost hit by a caravan. A moment later, Clover, who was curious, immediately asked a cashier named Alan about her sister who had gone missing a year ago in this area. Hearing this, Alan suspected that Melanie disappeared after crossing the Glory Valley area. Because according to local myth, anyone who passes through that area is certain to mysteriously disappear. In the middle of Rasasio, Clover, who was eager to find her sister, planned to take the risk by going to search for her in that area. I think I know where Mel must have gone. Shortly after, during the journey, Clover felt terrified when she saw the extremely severe stormy weather. Amid her anxiety, Clover asked the driver named Abe to pull over for a moment. However, the curly-haired girl named Nina said that it would be very dangerous to pull over in a place like this, because if something happened, they could be hit by a falling tree. In the midst of their heated argument, something astonishing suddenly happened. Upon their arrival at the secluded and remote villa, tucked away from civilization, they were immediately struck with a sense of profound astonishment to witness a truly bizarre and inexplicable rain phenomenon occurring specifically within this isolated area. Amidst the growing sense of bewilderment and confusion that filled the air, Megan's eyes suddenly fell upon a weathered grave nearby, and she was instantly overcome by an overwhelming and deeply unsettling bad feeling that something was terribly wrong. Then, out of curiosity, Nina invited the others to check out the only villa in this place. That's crazy. Inside the villa, Nina and her friends were instantly impressed by the classic interior of the place. While checking things out, Nina was puzzled when she saw an hourglass. Meanwhile, in the next room, Abe was shocked to find numerous missing person posters. At the same time, Clover, who was checking the rain, was suddenly puzzled when she saw the shadow of someone in the heavy downpour. Thinking it was her older sibling, the worried Clover hurried to check it out. In that singular, terrifying moment, absolutely no one present could have possibly grasped the true nature of what was unfolding before their very eyes. Yet without any warning or explanation, the entire surrounding landscape was abruptly plunged into a deep, impenetrable, and suffocating darkness that seemed to swallow everything in sight, leaving the crowd in a state of total and utter bewilderment as they struggled to comprehend the mysterious phenomenon occurring all around them. Meanwhile, inside, Nina was puzzled when she saw the guest book with the same name written over and over again. But the more it was written, the more illegible the handwriting became. At that moment, Abe called them over to show them something. Moments later, they were shocked to find Melanie's poster among the missing person posters. Shortly after Clover saw her sister's name in the guest book, she became convinced that her sister had disappeared in this place. At that moment, Sontak Nina was also puzzled when she saw the hourglass suddenly activate on its own. Amidst their confusion, they were startled when they heard a sound coming from outside. They were immediately shocked to see that their car was being stolen by someone. Sensing something was wrong, Abe immediately urged his friends to look for weapons. When they arrived in the basement, Max was surprised to find a window installed in the underground room. At the same time, Clover, who was trying to call for help, was once again hindered by the director. Back upstairs, Abe, who heard a commotion coming from another room, decided to check it out. Upon hearing a sudden and incredibly loud echoing crash emanating from the very next room down the hallway, a deeply worried and visibly anxious Nina immediately hurried across the floor to search frantically for her friend Abe. Oh my God! Nina was instantly shocked when she saw Abe being brutally attacked by the psychopath. At that moment, Max, after hearing Nina's story, began to sense something was wrong. Seeing Nina killed by the psychopath, a panicked Max urged the others to hide. Thinking that Psychopath hadn't noticed him, Max, seeing a teak chair, intended to take him out. Unfortunately, the unsuspecting Max, who had absolutely no idea just how incredibly powerful and formidable Psychopath truly was, tragically ended up losing his life immediately after being violently struck by the massive heavy piece of solid teak wood. Seeing this, Clover and Melanie, who were hiding, felt as if their days were numbered. Before they could even begin to catch their breath or find a moment of respite, Chinmerik was forced to endure even further agonizing torture and relentless suffering at the hands of his captors. With lightning speed and a teleportation move, Psychopath managed to finish off Clover. Honestly, no one really knows what actually happened. After the hourglass reset, suddenly they found themselves alive again at the moment when the dark night was approaching. When they gathered together, they were shocked by everything they had just experienced. They were even more horrified when they saw their photos displayed with the status of missing persons. Sensing that something was wrong, Abe urged them to leave immediately. But suddenly, they were instantly terrified when they saw the door moving on its own. And then, just as the ancient hourglass began to slowly activate, at that very specific moment, Megan felt that something was terribly wrong with her physical body. They were completely struck with panic when they witnessed Megan suddenly become violently possessed and then completely disappear from their sight. Amidst the panic, they hurried to check after hearing a mumbling voice. They were utterly shocked to find that Megan was truly possessed by the spirit of a missing victim. Is someone there? Who's there? This city! Just let this stop! I just want to die. Help! He's starting to attack me. Has anyone seen Tommy? This will end. What's going to happen? Once again, Megan felt like she was dying. Then the panic grew even worse when they heard someone arriving. Is there someone there? Hearing the sound of Melanie's frightened and trembling voice, the deeply worried Clover immediately opened the heavy door to the room. But when they checked, all they found was a rickety house that had suddenly appeared in front of the villa. Help! As the complex situation gradually unfolded before their eyes, it became increasingly clear to the entire group that this time they were destined to face a profound and overwhelming form of magical and mystical terror. They realized, with a deep sense of growing dread, that their previous experiences had not prepared them for such ancient supernatural forces. This unexpected confrontation meant they had to stand their ground against haunting, otherworldly horrors that threatened to defy all logical explanation. In an instant, Clover, who had just realized what was happening, panicked when she saw the figure of Nini Nini calmly inhaling farts from a gas cylinder. Sensing that things were about to go wrong, the terrified Clover decided to sneak out of the house. Seeing the old woman wake up, the panicked Clover begged to be allowed to leave. Then the old woman said that the only way to escape this place was to survive until morning. Because if you do not take care, they would eventually become a permanent part of this dark place. They will suffer endlessly, and they will surely swallow you up too. After being forced to inhale the fart from the cylinder, Clover was suddenly possessed, and the old woman turned into ashes. Max sought Clover, but suddenly Nina and Abe fled, leaving them behind. What was that? They immediately panicked when they saw the shadow of Titan in the darkness. Unfortunately, in a truly tragic turn of events, once again, they ended up meeting their untimely deaths at the very hands of that cold-blooded and relentless psychopath. Meanwhile, Max was still trying to find Clover's whereabouts. Overwhelmed by a growing sense of fear, Max made the difficult decision to turn back around. But then, quite suddenly, tragically, Max met his end at the hands of Clover, who had become completely possessed by a malevolent force that compelled her to commit such a horrific act against her will. Tragically, once again, absolutely not a single person managed to survive. After facing a gruesome and repetitive death for what felt like the umpteenth time, those weary individuals who miraculously came back to life slowly began to realize the horrifying truth. They were inextricably trapped within a complex and seemingly unbreakable time loop phenomenon that forced them to relive their final moments over and over again without any hope of a permanent escape from this eternal cycle of suffering and rebirth. In short, while sharing some drinking water, Clover, recalling the words of the old woman in the cabin, said that the way to break free from the time loop was to survive until the hourglass ran out. Then, Megan, who was feeling weak, urged them to hold on as best they could because she felt that the longer they were trapped in this place, the worse her condition became. In the middle of their conversation, they were suddenly surprised by Abe, who started coughing. In the midst of the rising panic, they were also deeply shocked by a strange phenomenon happening to both Abe and Nina at the same time. Not long after they witnessed this, another even more terrifying horror suddenly struck Megan, catching everyone completely off guard. Seeing Megan explode like a firecracker, Clover realized that this death was caused by the water they had drunk. After saying that, Megan, wanting everyone to survive together, asked Max to start over from the beginning. Then suddenly, Clover was suddenly surprised when she was approached by Alan, the shop owner. Amid the confusion, Alan said that Clover had actually almost succeeded if only she had held on a little longer. In an instant, after coming back to life, Megan was shocked to find fangs growing in her gums. At that moment, Clover, who found the document, was shocked to discover an identification badge, revealing that she was a psychiatrist. At the same time, Abe, who was reading a newspaper, found a news article stating that 20 years ago, there had been a mining accident in this area, causing a landslide that buried the settlement. After learning this, they realized that this villa was actually the top floor. Then, Nina, who was curious, decided to check the front door. They were immediately terrified when they saw an underground corridor accompanied by a mysterious and horrifying sound. At that moment, Max, who had found a cassette tape, intended to check it out. It turned out that the recording was of an experiment conducted by Alan in which he tested one of the survivors trapped in the time loop by triggering their trauma. After being trapped in the time loop for several nights, the man underwent a mutation and transformed into a terrifying creature. Until finally, after being trapped for more than 13 nights, he transformed into a ravenous creature known as the Wendigo. The transformation began to take effect, turning him into a creature known for extreme violence. Upon hearing Alan's voice on the radio, Clover immediately asked how to escape the time loop. Alan then said that if Clover wanted to know the answer, she should meet him in the forest area. It seemed like a trap. Clover was warned not to trust him. However, Abe suggested that Clover should go because if they failed, they could just repeat it again by discounting their age before the hourglass ran out. That did make some sense. Clover hurried off to look for Alan. What? Hey! Mina! Moments later, they became annoyed because Abe actually suggested that Clover go alone. And just to be safe, Max planned to go with Megan to check on Clover. But before that, Abe was asked to be ready to discount their age if Max and Megan didn't return within an hour. Meanwhile, Clover, who was wandering around, ended up falling into Leon Essie's trap. Damn it. Then suddenly, I am reaching out because I am quite concerned and would like to formally inquire about the current status and well-being of Clover. Could you please provide an update to confirm if Clover is doing okay and if everything is proceeding as expected? A few moments later, Max and Megan tried to find Clover's whereabouts. In the midst of their frantic search, they were startled when they heard a strange sound. Max. Overwhelmed by the heavy and heartbreaking realization that Megan could no longer be saved from her dire situation, Max took a deep breath and quickly continued his desperate and exhaustive search through the area, hoping against hope to find something else. Back to Clover, in a weakened state, she tried to crawl away to escape. Not long after, Max arrived and tried to free her leg from the trap. But then... oh my god. Clover was utterly shocked when she saw her sister, who had already died 13 times, now transformed into a Wendigo. Upon arriving at the mining area, Clover, curious, asked about the other's condition. Then Max said that Megan had just been killed by the Wendigo while Nina and Abe were hiding inside the house. Feeling that they were already dead, Clover asked Max to repeat everything again. After Clover had tragically passed away, Max, who was now left entirely all alone in the world, finally decided to drink the mysterious water that possessed the power to make his entire body explode. In the moments immediately following the miraculous event where everyone was suddenly brought back to life, Abe found himself feeling deeply bewildered and disoriented as he began to notice a sharp, persistent sensation of pain radiating throughout his lower back. They were all shocked when they saw Abe showing symptoms of turning into a Wendigo. At that moment, Clover, still curious, asked how many times they had died. Then Nina said that, as of now, we've already died 12 times. Hearing that, Clover couldn't believe it because as far as she remembered, they'd only died 4 times. So Nina asked Clover to check the guest book. And sure enough, after checking, it turned out they really had died 12 times. Feeling that this was their last chance, Clover asked everyone to make sure no one died again. In other words, this was their last life. Or else they'll become a Wendigo like Melanie. In the midst of their confusion, they suddenly panicked when they realized Megan had disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, Abe, who was idly checking his phone, suddenly found several recordings that he himself didn't remember making. Don't worry, Abe. What? It's...
Locked. Damn. Oh my god. Oh my god. I am looking at that particular object over there, and I am genuinely curious to understand exactly what that thing could possibly be, as its appearance is quite unfamiliar to me at this moment. What is that?
It turns out these recordings are of their death experiences that they don't remember while being trapped in the time loop. Moments later, they found a video of Megan, who intended to follow Alan into the corridor behind the door. Still in shock, they were puzzled when they heard a commotion outside the house. They immediately panicked when they saw a group of Wendigos storming the villa. Feeling there was no other way, Clover immediately made preparations, daringly set out to find Megan, and intended to take out Alan. After mentally preparing themselves, they quickly set off to search. Wow. Upon arriving at the residential area buried by the landslide, they recklessly decided to enter. Moments later, they panicked when they saw a Wendigo, but here they realized that the Wendigos relied solely on their hearing. After being suddenly jump-scared by the terrifying and creepy Wendigo, they immediately turned and ran away as fast as they possibly could. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. I seek forgiveness from Allah. The situation got even worse when they were confronted by the psychopath. Amidst the tension, Clover was asked to quickly look for Megan while the others would try to fight off the psychopath. Back to Clover. During her search, she became confused about which direction to take. What terrible luck. Now Clover had to face Wendigo Melanie. When the young girl Clover found herself completely cornered against the cold wall, she desperately tried to find a single fleeting opportunity to launch a counterattack against her formidable opponents. In the end, though it was heartbreaking, Clover managed to end her sister's suffering. Much like the legendary Power Rangers, with a powerful and coordinated combination attack, they finally managed to successfully finish off the dangerous psychopath wielding a heavy hammer. But just as they began to feel a brief sense of relief, they suddenly panicked once again when they heard the terrifying sound of dozens of hungry Wendigos starting to approach their location. Back to Clover, who was looking for a way out, panicked when she heard the Wendigo's voice. Meggie! Oh, Meggie, over here!
Meggie!
Meggie! Wait! Be careful! Finally, Clover found Megan, although she was trapped together with the Wendigo. Then, Clover hurried off to look for the key first. A moment later, Clover was surprised to find many CCTV cameras in the room. At that moment, Alan, who had just arrived, said that all this time he had often conducted research on people who happened to come to places with anomalies. It turns out that besides being a researcher, Alan is also a watcher who often conducts experiments on people trapped in time loop areas. For those who have played the game, you probably already know what that means. In the middle of all the chatter, Clover, who noticed some drops of water, intended to mix them into Alan's coffee. Of course, that's true. But why? Why are you doing this? People with trauma. When I subjected them both to intense feelings of terror and a sudden brilliant spark, creating a powerful reaction. Napovich? Feeling that his plan had worked, Clover confidently said that this time, Alan will feel what the participants feel. Immediately after Alan suddenly turned quite pale, Clover rushed forward in a desperate attempt to save Megan. Fortunately, those who managed to get out in time were able to trap the Wendigo. As the hourglass was about to run out, now they had to survive for as long as possible. No, that is absolutely not right. No, that is not right. Finally, they managed to escape the time loop after surviving until the hourglass ran out. At that moment, Abe, who was ready to drive, invited the others to leave. In the very next fleeting moment, Shin immediately transitioned his physical presence and focus directly into the middle of Alan's cluttered and sophisticated private research laboratory room. It turns out Alan, who has come back to life, continues his experiments, and now the story will focus on a snowy cabin, just like in the first Until Dawn game. And with that, the film comes to an end.